in the glittering of New York that night like a crown of diamonds. The city's elite gathered in a ballroom where chandeliers blazed like captured stars, where champagne sparkled, and secrets hid beneath silk gowns and designer tuxedos. It was not just a gala. It was a showcase of power. And at the center of it all stood Alexander Kane. Billionaire. CEO. The man the tabloids called the King of Wall Street. His presence alone could silence a room, his voice could shift markets, his empire stretched across continents. To the world, he was invincible. To his wife, he was something far colder. Beside him, radiant yet understated, was Naomi Brooks. A graceful woman with eyes full of warmth the world rarely noticed, and a love so fierce it could have healed even a man like Alexander, if only he had let it. But Alexander had one obsession that outweighed all else: legacy. An heir to carry his name, his empire, his pride. And when Naomi's doctors revealed she had fibroids, an obstacle to giving him the children he craved, Alexander's love curdled into cruelty. That night, in front of the glittering elite, he delivered the final blow. "She cannot give me children," he announced, his voice sharp as broken glass, cutting through the music, through Naomi's heart. "What use is a wife who cannot give me an heir? She is worthless." Gasps rippled through the ballroom. The orchestra faltered mid-note. Flashbulbs exploded as cameras captured the moment of her destruction. Naomi's heart cracked under the weight of his words, her humiliation magnified 1,000 times by the glittering eyes of strangers. She could not speak. She could not fight. With every ounce of dignity she had left, Naomi walked away. Out of the gala. Out of his world. Out of his life. The tabloids feasted on the scandal. Billionaire CEO discards wife like trash. Naomi Brooks became yesterday's story, swallowed by the shadows of the city. Forgotten. But in those shadows, something unexpected bloomed. Naomi rebuilt herself. She drowned her pain in purpose, carving a path in medicine, chasing brilliance with unrelenting fire. From shattered dignity rose an unstoppable force. She became one of the world's top oncologists. And in her quietest hours, she nurtured a secret so powerful it could bring even a billionaire to his knees. Quadruplets. For children. For living, breathing testaments to a love she once believed in. Children who carried Alexander's fire, his eyes, his blood, children he never knew existed. And if this moment already has you hooked, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share it. Because the deeper we go, the more twists, heartbreaks, and breathtaking moments await. Years passed. Empires rose higher. Pride reigned unchallenged. But fate is merciless. Because Alexander Kane, the man who thought himself untouchable, was struck down not by rivals, not by scandal, but by something he could not command, his own body. A rare, aggressive cancer. For the first time, he was powerless. For the first time, he was desperate. And desperation led him to the world's top oncologist. He expected brilliance. He expected skill. What he did not expect was her. Naomi Brooks. No longer the broken wife, but the surgeon holding his life in her steady hands. And she was not alone. The secret she carried, for children who mirrored him like shadows, was about to shatter the walls of pride he had built his empire upon. Now, as life and death hang in balance, one question remains. Will Alexander Kane's pride destroy him again, or will love, destiny, and the four little hearts he never knew exist rewrite their story forever?
New York glittered like a jewel that night, every window of its skyline blazing with a fire that dared the stars to compete. But even the heavens seemed to bow before the brilliance of the Kane Foundation Gala, the most coveted event of the season. Inside the ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria, chandeliers dripped with crystal light. Champagne flowed like liquid gold. Silk gowns whispered across marble floors as cameras flashed, capturing power, wealth, and the illusion of perfection. At the very heart of it all stood Alexander Kane. The tabloids called him the King of Wall Street. Every handshake he offered sealed empires. Every word he spoke could ripple through markets like thunder over still water. Tonight, his empire shimmered around him, an empire built on ambition, ruthlessness, and pride. And at his side stood Naomi Brooks Kane. She was radiant, though understated. No glittering diamonds on her neck, no tiara in her hair, only a simple gown of midnight silk, and eyes that carried both warmth and storms. In those eyes burned a love fierce enough to heal even the coldest of men. A love she had poured, selflessly, into the man beside her. But Alexander did not see warmth. He did not see storms. He saw only one thing missing: legacy. The whispers had already started in hushed circles of silk and smoke. The Kanes have no heir. 3 years of marriage, and no child. The pressure gnawed at Alexander's pride, every word like acid. And Naomi, his wife, his once cherished companion, had become, in his eyes, the symbol of that failure. Doctors had given the verdict Naomi had dreaded: fibroids. A cruel twist of fate, robbing her of the easy dream of motherhood. Naomi had wept. She had prayed. She had hoped Alexander would choose love over legacy. But Alexander Kane did not bend. He did not forgive weakness. And that night, beneath the blinding lights of the gala, his pride demanded blood. The orchestra swelled to a glittering crescendo. Glasses clinked. Laughter danced. And then, Alexander's voice cut through it all. "She cannot give me children." The music faltered mid-note. Conversations died. Heads turned. Cameras lifted, hungry. Alexander's words were sharp as shattered glass, slicing through Naomi's heart with merciless cruelty. "What use is a wife who cannot give me an heir?" His tone was cold, calculated. "She is worthless." The ballroom gasped. A ripple of shock, of scandal, of whispered delight passed through the crowd. Flashbulbs exploded, freezing Naomi's heartbreak into photographs that would tomorrow grace every tabloid cover. Naomi stood frozen, her soul cracking under the weight of humiliation. Her breath caught, but no words came. She could not fight, not here, not with her dignity shattered in front of the glittering elite. With every ounce of grace she had left, Naomi turned. She walked. Past the eyes that pitted, past the mouths that whispered, past the man who had once sworn to love her. She walked out of the ballroom. Out of his world. Out of his life. The doors closed behind her with a finality that echoed louder than the applause that timidly followed Alexander's toast. And as Naomi vanished into the cold shadows of the city, the cameras turned their lenses on Alexander Kane, the man who had just discarded his wife like a broken ornament. By morning, the headlines screamed. Billionaire CEO casts off wife at gala. Naomi Brooks, discarded, humiliated, forgotten. But the world was wrong. Naomi Brooks was not finished. Not yet. New York in winter is merciless. The night Naomi Brooks left the gala, snow fell in sharp, glittering shards, stinging her face as though the heavens themselves mocked her humiliation. She walked with no destination, only the hollow sound of her heels striking pavement, echoing her broken heartbeat. In her chest, an emptiness. In her mind, his words replaying, again and again. Worthless. The tabloids feasted on her shame. Every headline screamed her downfall. Discarded wife of Wall Street king. Naomi Brooks, from gala queen to tragic failure. But while the world laughed, Naomi wept only once. One night, in a small rented room, she let the tears come until dawn broke. And then, she rose. She made a vow. If Alexander Kane thought she was worthless, she would prove him wrong, not with revenge, but with brilliance. Naomi threw herself into her studies. Medicine became her salvation. Days blurred into nights, nights into years. She studied until her eyes burned, worked until her hands ached. She stitched wounds, held dying hands, memorized anatomy as if it were scripture. And slowly, the broken woman became steel. From ashes, fire was born. But fate had not finished with her. Months after leaving Alexander, Naomi discovered a secret that shook her to her core. At first, she thought it impossible. A cruel joke. But the truth was undeniable. She was pregnant. Not with one child. Not with two. Not even with 3. 4. Quadruplets. Life, blooming inside the body she had been told was barren. Naomi's tears returned, but this time, they were not of shame. They were of awe, of fear, of fierce, protective love. She told no one. Not Alexander. Not the tabloids. Not the world that had mocked her. These children were hers alone. Hers to protect. Hers to raise in the quiet shadows, far from the cruelty of his pride. And so, as Naomi climbed the ranks of medicine, as she carved her place among the world's top oncologists, she also raised 4 children who carried the fire of their father in their eyes. Ethan, the oldest, bold, curious, a leader. Elijah, gentle yet brilliant, his mind always racing. Eva, fierce, sharp-tongued, unafraid to challenge anyone. And Eden, the quiet dreamer, with eyes too much like Alexander's. They were her strength. Her secret. Her heart. Years passed. Naomi Brooks became more than a name. She became a legend in medical circles, the surgeon who achieved the impossible, the healer who would not bow to fate. But even as her name rose, Alexander Kane's empire soared higher. His face was splashed across magazine covers, Forbes lists, financial news. He was still the king of Wall Street, untouched, untouchable. Or so it seemed. Because pride has sharp edges. And time has no mercy. As Naomi saved lives in sterile white rooms, far from the glitter of galas, Alexander's body began to betray him. First, fatigue. Then, unexplained pain. Then, the diagnosis that would crack his invincible facade. A rare, aggressive cancer. And when all other doctors failed him, when his empire of wealth and power could not buy him health, Alexander Kane would be forced to seek the one person he had once called worthless. Naomi Brooks. His past. his salvation, and the mother of the children he never knew existed. While Naomi Brooks built her new world in silence, far from flashing cameras and cruel headlines, Alexander Kane's empire only grew louder. The years crowned him with greater power. New skyscrapers bore his name, new companies folded beneath his reach. His face became a symbol of ruthless success, on magazine covers, on financial networks, on the lips of those who worshipped wealth. The King of Wall Street. Untouchable. Invincible. But behind the polished smile and the immaculate suit, Alexander's life was not as golden as it appeared. His penthouse, though filled with priceless art, echoed with silence. His dinners were long, lavish, and lonely. His bed was cold, no laughter, no small footsteps, no family to soften the marble edges of his empire. And though he never spoke of it, whispers followed him, like ghosts in the corridors of high society. Still no heir. A kingdom without a prince. All that power, and no one to inherit it. Alexander dismissed such talk with a scoff. Yet in his quietest moments, when the city slept beneath his window, he felt the sting of emptiness. He told himself Naomi had been weak. That discarding her had been necessary. That he had lost nothing. But the truth, sharp and unyielding, lingered beneath his pride. He had lost more than he cared to admit. And then came the shadows. At first, they were small. Fatigue after meetings. Sleepless nights that no amount of fine wine or luxury could cure. A pain, sharp and strange, that he ignored with the arrogance of a man who believed himself immortal. But shadows grow. Doctors were called. Tests were run. The verdict whispered like a curse across mahogany desks and sterile examination rooms. A rare, aggressive cancer. For the first time, Alexander Kane knew fear. Real fear. The kind no boardroom victory or billion-dollar deal could conquer. His empire could not protect him. His money could not buy time. He was a man at war with his own body, and he was losing. Specialists from across the globe were summoned. Each one failed. Each one shook their head with pity in their eyes. And with every failed treatment, every failed hope, Alexander's pride cracked. Until at last, his advisors, his doctors, his desperate circle spoke one name. One name that chilled him more than the disease itself. Naomi Brooks. The world's top oncologist. Brilliant. Relentless. The surgeon who achieved the impossible. The woman he had thrown away. The woman he had called worthless. And now, perhaps the only woman who could save his life. The once invincible Alexander Kane now sat in a hospital suite, the empire of his body collapsing faster than any fortune could rebuild. The city he once commanded glowed beyond the glass windows, but he no longer felt like its king. His hands trembled. His chest ached. His reflection in the glass looked foreign, paler, thinner, stripped of arrogance. Every specialist had failed him. Every treatment had crumbled. And now, desperation had forced him into a corner he never imagined he'd stand in. For the first time in his life, Alexander Kane was powerless. And so, when the door opened that day, when the soft echo of footsteps approached his bed, he did not look up at first. He expected another doctor with another pitying gaze. Another lecture about odds and treatments. Another reminder of his mortality. But then, he heard her voice. Low. Calm. Steady. A voice that once soothed him in his darkest nights, a voice that once whispered promises beneath silk sheets. Mr. Kane, she said, clinical but unshaken. I'll be handling your case. His heart stopped. His head lifted. And there she was. Naomi Brooks. But not the Naomi he remembered. Not the trembling woman he had humiliated. Not the wife who had walked away in tears. This Naomi was transformed. Her white coat draped over her like armor, her presence commanding, her gaze sharp with brilliance. Her beauty, refined and untouchable, radiated with the quiet strength of a woman forged in fire. For a moment, Alexander could not breathe. "You," he rasped, his voice breaking. "You're the doctor?" Naomi's eyes held no trace of the girl who once wept for him. Only the calm authority of a surgeon who held life and death in her hands. "Yes," she said evenly. "And if you want to live, you'll let me do my job." The silence between them was heavy, thick with years of unspoken words, old wounds, and memories neither dared touch. But Alexander's pride, though cracked, was not dead. His jaw tightened. His old arrogance flickered, even in weakness. "You, of all people," he muttered bitterly. "The world's top oncologist." Naomi's expression did not change. Life is funny that way. Their eyes locked. The man who once discarded her as worthless, now clinging to the possibility of survival only she could offer. But Naomi was not alone. Because beyond the hospital walls, waiting at home, were 4 children. Children who carried Alexander's eyes, his fire, his blood. Children who would one day force this proud man to face a truth greater than his illness. The legacy he had once thrown away lived on, in secret. And as Alexander lay in that hospital bed, staring at the woman he had broken, a quiet storm gathered. This was no longer about pride. This was no longer about power. This was about survival. This was about destiny. And destiny had just brought him back to the very woman who had every reason to let him die. Beyond the sterile walls of the hospital, far from Alexander Kane's battle with pride and mortality, life bloomed in a quiet Brooklyn townhouse. It was here that Naomi Brooks shed her armor. Here, the brilliant surgeon, respected and untouchable, became simply, Mom. The house was alive with the chaos only 4 children could bring. Ethan, the eldest by 3 minutes, was the natural leader. Bold, protective, always the first to step forward. He wore responsibility like a crown, his small shoulders already carrying the instincts of a man twice his age. Elijah was softer, gentler. Where Ethan charged, Elijah thought. He lived in books and sketches, in questions too big for his young world. His brilliance mirrored Naomi's, his quiet curiosity a gift and a burden. Eva, fierce and fiery, was Naomi's mirror in spirit. Sharp-tongued, fearless, with a stubborn spark that could challenge even the strongest will. She had Alexander's fire in her eyes, the same intensity, but untamed, unbroken. And then there was Eden. The dreamer. The quiet soul who lingered in the corners, watching, listening. His eyes, deep, hauntingly familiar, were the very same steel gray as Alexander Kane's. Looking into them was like staring into the past Naomi had sworn to forget. Together, they were Naomi's secret, her strength, her joy. The world saw her as a doctor, a healer. But at night, when she tucked them into bed, whispered stories, and kissed their foreheads, she was simply theirs. The children had questions, of course. "Mom, where's our dad?" Ethan asked once, his voice braver than his heart. Naomi had paused, her hand brushing through his hair. "Your father is a complicated man," she said softly. "But one day, you'll understand." And though she spoke with calm, her chest ached with the weight of the truth. Because their father was not just any man. He was Alexander Kane, the man who had called her worthless, the man now lying in her care, his life resting in her hands. Naomi kept her world separate. The hospital. The townhouse. The children. The billionaire. But secrets have a way of unraveling. Already, whispers circled among colleagues about Naomi's private life. Already, the tabloids had begun sniffing after Alexander's mysterious treatment. And already, fate was stitching threads that would draw these four children into the very storm Naomi had tried to shield them from. For Alexander Kane was not just her patient. He was their father. And soon, whether by choice or by destiny, he would know it. In the private wing of New York Memorial Hospital, Alexander Kane sat in silence. For once, the man who could command empires with a single word had none left. The drip of machines, the hum of filtered air, these were his new boardroom. And standing over him was the one woman he could not command. Naomi Brooks. No longer his wife. Now, his surgeon. Her voice was steady as she explained his treatment plan, rare, precise, experimental. The kind of medicine that required brilliance, patience, and trust. But trust was a currency Alexander had never traded in. "Do you understand the risks?" Naomi asked. Her tone was professional, detached. But beneath her words pulsed old wounds, scars he could not see. Alexander met her gaze, steel against steel. "I've built an empire by taking risks." Naomi's lips curved, not into a smile, but something closer to sorrow. "This isn't about money, Alexander. This is about your life. And you don't get to buy another one." For the first time in years, someone spoke to him not as the king of Wall Street, not as the billionaire, but as a man stripped bare. And it unnerved him. Each session tested him, not just his body, but his pride. Chemotherapy left him weak. Radiation seared his strength. Yet Naomi was always there, calm, precise, untouchable. Her presence was a reminder of everything he had destroyed, and everything he might lose again. Late one night, when the hospital halls were silent, Alexander broke the barrier. "Why are you doing this, Naomi?" His voice cracked, not with weakness, but with something rarer. Vulnerability. She paused, her hand tightening on the chart. "Because I took an oath. To save lives. Even yours." But her eyes said more. That she had once loved him enough to give him everything. That beneath her anger still lived a wound only he could have inflicted. For Alexander, it was unbearable. For Alexander, it was magnetic. The man who had humiliated her now found himself needing her, drawn to her. And for the first time, Alexander Kane, the untouchable king, wondered if the empire he had built was nothing compared to the empire he had destroyed, a home, a love, a family. What Naomi did not know was that Alexander had begun to notice small, strange details. A child's drawing folded into her notebook. A second toothbrush in her office sink. The faint scent of crayons and cookies that no surgeon should carry. Something in her life was hidden. Something powerful. Something that, if it belonged to him, could shatter the walls of pride forever. And Alexander Kane was a man who always got answers. The rain fell hard that night, a relentless storm beating against the glass walls of Alexander Kane's penthouse. The city below shimmered in fractured light, neon bleeding through the downpour. Inside, Alexander stood restless, papers scattered, medicine bottles lined on the counter. The empire he had built now seemed like ash in his hands. Power had no meaning when death stalked his veins. But it wasn't cancer keeping him awake. It was her. Naomi Brooks. The way she looked at him, not as a titan, not as a husband, not as a man, but as something she could no longer trust. He could endure pain. He could endure disease. But not that distance. Not from her. That night, fate snapped the thread Naomi had fought so hard to protect. He had left his chauffeur waiting and wandered into Brooklyn, into the modest neighborhood Naomi now called home. He told himself it was curiosity, or perhaps strategy. But deep down, it was something he refused to name. The door was ajar. Laughter spilled out. Small, innocent, musical. A sound that struck him harder than any diagnosis. He stepped inside. And the world stopped. For children, bright-eyed, alive, undeniable, filled the living room. Their toys scattered across the floor, their drawings taped proudly to the walls. A messy kind of love, so warm it burned. But what froze Alexander Kane, what hollowed his chest, was their faces. Ethan looked up first, bold and unafraid. His jawline was his own. Elijah's gray eyes, Alexander's gray eyes, studied him with silent curiosity. Eva, fierce and fiery, stood like a challenge, her stance a mirror of his boardroom authority. And Eden, the quiet dreamer, stared at him as if he already knew. For reflections. For truths. For lives. His children. The storm outside roared, but it was nothing compared to the storm inside him. Who are they? The words broke from his lips, raw, strangled. Naomi stood in the doorway, frozen, her medical coat still on. She had worked an 18-hour shift and returned to the one place the world couldn't touch her. But tonight, the walls had fallen. Her eyes glistened, not with shame, but with a fierce, protective fire. "They're mine," she said. Her voice was steady, though her heart thundered. "They're ours." The words cracked him open. Memories flooded back, nights of passion, whispers of promises, the love he once crushed beneath his obsession for legacy. The legacy he had thrown away stood before him now, not in numbers, not in empires, but in flesh and blood. Alexander stumbled back, breathless. All his pride. All his arrogance. All his cruelty. What were they now, compared to this? Naomi's chin lifted, her tears burning like diamonds in the stormlight. You called me worthless, Alexander. But look at them. Tell me again, do you still believe that? Silence. The storm raged. 4 children waited. And for the first time in his life, Alexander Kane, the king of Wall Street, was not in control. The storm passed, but its shadow lingered. Alexander Kane, once untouchable, now stood at the edge of 2 fates, life or death, family or pride. Days blurred into nights at the hospital. The battle against cancer was brutal, nausea, weakness, moments when his empire felt like dust and his body like a cage. But for the first time, he wasn't fighting alone. Naomi was there. Steady, unyielding. Not as his wife. Not yet. But as the surgeon who refused to let him die. And sometimes, when exhaustion softened her eyes, as the woman who still remembered what it was like to love him. The children became part of his recovery. Ethan's bold encouragement. Elijah's sketches pinned by his bed. Eva's fiery debates that made him laugh for the first time in months. And Eden, quiet, soulful Eden, who would simply hold his hand, reminding him of a truth Alexander had never faced: power meant nothing without love. But healing the body was easier than healing the past. The tabloids got wind of the story: disgraced CEO treated by ex-wife surgeon, and vultures circled. Investors whispered, board members grew restless. Alexander's empire trembled. His enemies smelled blood. One evening, when the city glowed against the twilight, Naomi confronted him. You can't have it both ways, Alexander, she said. You can't fight for power and expect to keep us safe. The children need more than a name, they need a father who chooses them. Her words cut deeper than the disease. Because for Alexander Kane, choosing family meant surrendering the throne he had spent a lifetime building. Pride battled love. Legacy battled destiny. And then, his body gave out. In a critical surgery, one Naomi alone could perform. Alexander's heart flatlined. The room swarmed with alarms, nurses rushing, the steady monotone of a machine declaring death. Naomi froze for a single breath, staring at the man who had once broken her, the man who had unknowingly given her the greatest gifts of her life. Her hands moved. Not as his ex-wife. Not as a betrayed woman. But as the surgeon who refused to let fate write their ending. Come back, Alexander, she whispered through gritted teeth as she fought for his life. Not for me. For them. Seconds stretched like hours. And then, a gasp. A heartbeat. Life returned. Alexander Kane survived. But it wasn't the billionaire who woke. It was a man reborn. In the weeks that followed, he did what no one expected. He stepped down as CEO, handing his empire to the board. His pride, once an iron crown, shattered into something humbler, something stronger. One quiet Sunday morning, Alexander appeared at Naomi's townhouse, not as a king demanding subjects, but as a man asking for forgiveness. He knelt, not before Naomi, but before 4 children with eyes that mirrored his own. I was blind, he said, his voice breaking. I thought legacy was power. But legacy is you. It's them. If you'll let me. I want to be their father. I want to be worthy of you. Silence held the room. Naomi's heart, scarred and cautious, weighed every word. Could she trust him again? Could she risk it all? Then Ethan stepped forward, bold as always, and placed his small hand in Alexander's. Elijah followed, with quiet trust. Eva hesitated, her fire sparking, before finally nodding. And Eden, with his haunting gray eyes, whispered one word. Dad. Naomi's tears fell freely, not from pain this time, but from the fragile, terrifying hope of a new beginning. The man who once called her worthless had been brought to his knees, by cancer, by fate, by love. And in that moment, the king of Wall Street found a kingdom greater than money, greater than pride. A family. Because in the end, it wasn't empires or heirs that defined him. It was 4 little hearts. And the one woman who held his life, and his redemption, in her hands. And so, the story comes full circle. Alexander Kane, the billionaire who once believed legacy meant power, learned that true legacy is written not in skyscrapers or fortune, but in the love we give, the family we cherish, and the courage to change before it's too late. Naomi Brooks, the woman once broken and discarded, rose from the ashes not as a victim, but as a healer, a mother, a force unshakable. In her strength, we see the truth, that what the world calls worthless can become the very thing that saves it. 4 little hearts. 1 second chance. A love reborn in the fire of pain and forgiveness. Because in the end, pride fades. Empires crumble. But love endures. And if this story touched you, if it made you believe in the power of second chances and the strength of love, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Comment your thoughts. Subscribe for more stories that move the heart and stir the soul. Because sometimes, the stories we carry remind us, we are never truly worthless. We are always enough.